Beautiful temperature. It's 80 degrees outside. I love it.
Raise your right hand.
The evidence you shall give the court and the jury and the trial physician should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, self you God.
Good afternoon.
All right, could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hey, my name is Special Agent Savannah Solomon with the FBI.
And what office are you with?
I'm with the Savannah Resident Agency out of the Atlanta Division.
How long have you been in educational background before joining the FBI?
I attended Georgia Tech, where I majored in Economics, International Affairs, and French, and went straight to Tulane for my Master's in Business Administration and Finance and Entrepreneurship. Following graduation, I joined the FBI as an analyst, where I worked in Charlotte and the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force Fusion Center in Washington, D.C., before becoming an agent for 8 years.
Okay, so after working in Charlotte as an analyst, you went to the academy, I guess?
I went to Washington, D.C. at our headquarters for 3 years, and then the academy.
Okay, and is Savannah, where you've been, Savannah, Georgia, I should say, where you've been the entire time as a full-fledged special agent?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you work closely with Brad Snyder?
I do.
I want to ask you about your involvement in the case. Did you become involved on day one on October 5th?
I did.
And did you go to Chatham County Police Department headquarters and participate in an interview or some interviews?
I did.
What detective were you paired up with?
Detective Nobles.
And whom did you interview that day of the three that we've been talking about?
Daniel Youngkin.
Okay. Can you tell us about his level of cooperation in the day one interviews?
He was forthcoming in regards to items about Quinton. He minimized on drug use and was defensive of Leilani.
What do you mean by defensive about Leilani?
He believed anything that she had told him that day and was told us he believed it was true.
Okay, so he didn't want to believe that she had done anything, basically.
Correct.
Can you tell us about his demeanor and tone in the interviews and his willingness to answer questions?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for opinion.
You're asking about the demeanor that she observed?
Mhm.
I'm gonna.
I interviewed him twice that day, once around 1:30 in the afternoon and once around 11 p.m. So it was a long day. He was willing to answer questions. I'd say by 11 was pretty tired of any line of questioning.
Okay. After your, well, let me ask you this. At some point that day, did you go to the residence at 535 Buckhalter Road?
I did.
And where did that fit into your involvement at Chatham County Police Department headquarters that you've been talking about?
After my first interview of Danny, the group kind of reconvened on what had happened in the different interviews, and because there was no need to continue talking at that point, Taylor, Burns, and I drove to the Buckhalter Road residence to assist with the search.
Now, were you present when Chatham County Police Department forensics were photographing the residence and various outbuildings and things?
I was.
Okay. And did you go in the garage yourself?
I did.
I'd like to display an image from State's Exhibit 10. It's image 109 in State's Exhibit 10. And let me see whether I can get the screen to cooperate here. All right. See that up on the screen?
I do.
What is that red thing? First of all, what room or building are we in at that house right now?
This is the garage outbuilding beyond, like separate from the house and the the pool area.
What is that red thing towards the bottom center of the picture?
That's a Mickey Mouse race car driver toy.
Is it like a stuffy kind of thing?
It is.
Okay. Can you describe how that thing looked to you that day?
As you can see, it's just kind of thrown in a garage with a bunch of tools and covered in cobwebs, and looks like it's been there for a minute.
Okay. Was this significant to you at the time?
It was.
And why is that?
Because Leilani had reported Quinton missing with his favorite toy, a Mickey Mouse toy.
And is that something that anybody else mentioned to you, him having a favorite toy, Mickey Mouse toy?
No. No one knew about a Mickey Mouse toy when I asked them about it.
Well, let me show you a video clip. At some point, did you have an exchange with the defendant while she was between interviews?
I did.
And can you tell us what was going on at that point? Like, where were you and where was she?
During the resident search, after it had gotten into nighttime, I was called back to Chatham County Police because they needed more people to escort the three individuals that were still there. So at that point, I was just sitting in the hallway with eyes on the different doors, and she was sitting in an interview room.
At some point, did she open up to you about some of her behavioral issues or anger issues?
She did.
I'm going to play for you a clip from State's Exhibit 13. It's a file bearing the file name Interview Room 2126 to 2229.
Need anything before we sit down a little bit more?
Should my brother store any food? Yeah, we're not taking it in there. We're going to be here. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for being patient with us. There's a lot of things we're trying to walk through and figure out. So, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Did I do well with that?
Yeah, I appreciate you.
As much detail as I could. I was being like, this is who.
A lot of good detail in here.
Pardon me, this is the wrong clip. I'm looking for Interview Room 2057 to 2103.
There are days that I wake up or days that something so little just might happen. And it's like a trigger. And a snap. And it's almost like I'm a completely different person. The way I talk, the way I move, the way I look at you. Everything, even my tone of voice. Can you feel that happening? You know? Where it's like, when it happens, I have finally reached a certain level of anger or stress or whatever it might be at that moment that it's like a switch. Yeah. I don't even realize it until after I've calmed down that I just seriously tripped on you and treated you like that for a reason. You know, and then I'm left apologizing to everybody. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm crazy. I don't know what happened. I don't even know why I did that. And half the time when it happens or randomly happens like that, and it's not like the slowly transition or whatever, it's it's because I don't even know how to explain it. If I'm doing pretty good throughout the day and I've had a good day overall, and then something might trigger, it's slower. Okay. I can feel it. I can feel myself changing the way I talk, the way I think, the opinions I have, everything. I can feel the difference. But when it happens, like they like today with the amount of stuff going on and stress and emotion or whatever, that's just not.
So that was day one of the investigation, right?
Correct.
On that day, was there a point where you spent some time alone with the defendant in a setting that wasn't recorded?
Yes, at some point around that time period of that video clip.
Did it have something to do with a cigarette or something like that?
She needed a smoke break outside, so I walked out with her.
At some point during that interaction, or maybe it was another one that day, did she say something to you about getting a tattoo?
Yes, she showed me her Hawaiian symbol tattoo about the waves going up and down, and said that she wanted to get a tattoo in honor of Quinton along with it.
And this was on October 5.
It was
She was talking about getting a tattoo with it.
in honor of him, yes.
Okay. At this point in time, was she still kind of representing the story that Quinton had been abducted?
Yes.
Was anybody yet talking about Quinton being dead?
We suspected it within the investigative team, but it had not been discussed outside of the investigative team.
I'd like to ask you a couple questions about your involvement over the following days. Did you follow up in reference to Danny's workplace?
I did.
Can you describe that follow-up, please, without talking about what anybody said to you, but what did y'all go out there to do?
Detective Noble and I met with Danny and Leilani's supervisor and spoke with him. He put us in touch with the corporate security who had video footage from the plant or the warehouse.
And did they turn footage around to you?
They did.
Why was it important to you to go out and talk to Danny's boss and to get video footage of what he looked like when he was leaving work?
We were doing our best to corroborate every single statement that had been made to us in the previous 24 hours, to include how and when Danny learned that Quinton was missing.
How he reacted?
Correct.
I'd like to draw your attention to the defendant's October 8th interview with Bridget Rock at the FBI office in Savannah.
Okay.
Were you present for that?
Not in the interview room, but I was in the office observing.
How did you observe that interview?
Closed circuit television through the office.
Okay, so did you watch it as it was occurring?
I watched much of it as it was occurring. I was also watching Danny in a simultaneous interview.
Did you observe any unusual behavior by the defendant on that day with reference to Bridget Rock's belongings or equipment or anything?
I did. Agent Brock had stepped out of the room, but the cameras were still rolling, and the defendant walked up to Miss Brock's computer system and unplugged it. And when it made a noise, she plugged it back in and sat back down.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
I'm sorry, that was after looking at the cameras and down the hallway. Was
there something about Bridget Brock's notes as well that had been left on the desk?
Not that I observed.
Okay. That evening, October 8th, that was the hotel surveillance operation?
It was.
And how many nights did that go on for? Was it one? Two?
One night.
Okay, just the one night. Were you involved in proposing that idea to Daniel Youngkin?
Yes,
And that would have been like the day before on the 7th?
it was.
Okay. Tell us about his reaction to that proposal.
The day he came to us, he was pretty broken in a lot of ways. He was still trying to figure out what he believed had happened. He was worried about his child, and was beginning to have conflicts between believing Leilani less, but also his loyalties to her, and was working through that. So when we got to the point of talking through a lot of his concerns there, he was willing, and actually was the one who said, are you going to want to wire up the hotel room? And we said, only with your permission. We wouldn't do that without your permission. So,
Are you saying he guessed? I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
we
At
had
that
it.
point, were y'all planning to ask him that?
We were planning to ask him that, so we were going down that road, but he was the first one to address wiring the room.
Okay, so he's the one who brought it up even though you were about to? Is that
Right.
what you're saying? Okay. Can you discuss briefly just the logistics of setting this up and then the monitoring plan that was put in place?
We had 2 adjacent hotel rooms at a nearby hotel, and our tech team worked their magic and used their special techniques to put audio and video monitoring equipment in the one room, and the live monitoring occurred right next door. So as we were in the next door room, we were observing via video feed and audio what was happening right next to us.
Can you, were you involved in monitoring it yourself?
I was there the entire time that they were awake.
Okay.
Yes,
And so you had the opportunity to see all their interactions.
I did.
Can you just sort of, I understand we're talking about like a whole night, but can you kind of summarize the nature of their interactions?
They were emotional, sometimes combative. They were never on the same page with what was going on with Quinton with the investigation. They took breaks to just go get a cigarette or go get a drink and kind of come back.
Was he asking her about the truthfulness or lack thereof of the Origel story?
Repeatedly.
And what was she saying in response to those inquiries?
She doubled down on the Origel and brought up her alibi with Miss D.
Is it fair to say that she was telling Danny the same lie that she was telling y'all?
Objection, Your Honor, leading questions.
I mean, the leading question is a question that calls for a particular answer. It's a yes or no question.
He is correct. You can go ahead with your question.
Is it fair to say that she was telling Danny the same lie that she was telling the police at
Yes.
this time?
She was telling Danny the same story. She was sorry.
Mr. Dean, you can proceed.
I'll just withdraw the questions.
Yes.
Is there anything that occurred during this full evening and night of hotel recordings that
Objection, Your Honor, it's a narrative question now. It's open-ended and broad.
I don't know how one could possibly object to a question that hasn't been finished, first of all, and I can assure you it does not call for a narrative response.
I've been here for over a week, Judge.
And-
I promise you that.
Be careful with the microphone for Miss Natalie.
It's an open-ended question, Judge. It doesn't ask for a specific answer unless the witness testifies to what they want to testify. That's exactly what a narrative question is, and that's improper.
I'm going to overrule and allow Mr. Dean to ask his question.
Was there anything that occurred during the hotel surveillance operation that suggested to you that Danny knew more than he was letting on or anything along those lines?
No.
I'd like to play a couple of clips from these recordings that have already been admitted into evidence and ask you a couple questions about them, okay?
Okay.
This is from State's Exhibit 32, the file beginning with 1941.
Question. Do you mind? Are you going to get mad at me? I'm going to ask you a question before I ask you this question. No, because I need to know. Are you going to get angry?
I can't tell you if I'm going to get angry, but I don't know the questions.
Why did you lie to me about the Oreo?
I didn't. I did not like you about the Oreo.
So you went and met Misty.
Yes, and I drove in and I drove out. And they tried to say that again, and I asked them to show me a picture of Missy or whatever. Did y'all speak to my phone lady? Did you speak to her or did you speak to her husband? Is what I wanted to know. You know? And they said her husband. Why didn't you speak to her?
Stop the playback at 1942:18 on the timestamp. What was that claim that the defendant just made about what the FBI told her as to whom they had interviewed in reference to the Misty story? What did she say there?
She stated we had not spoken to the person she referenced as Misty, but we had spoken to that person's husband.
She said that y'all told her that.
Correct.
Okay. And this is on the night of the 8th, right?
Correct.
You said you were there for observing Bridget Brock's interview with the defendant earlier on this day, right?
Yes.
And anybody from the FBI told her anything like that?
No.
I'm opening up the clip on the same exhibit, the file name that begins 2029. And I'm going to start the playback at 20:33:05 on the timestamp.
And you went and met Misty.
Went and met Misty, got Orville.
And you said they told her?
I think so, yes.
What did she say?
And she confirmed it.
She confirmed
I'm
it?
pretty sure, yes. It's not like they sat there and told me what was said.
Oh, but they...
They said that they spoke to Misty and they didn't question me no more about the Orville.
Oh, okay.
What we just heard there, is that an accurate characterization of the defendant's interactions with Bridget Brock during that interview earlier that day?
No.
Sometime shortly after this October 8th hotel room monitoring thing, is that when the phone wire operation started?
It started on October 9th, yes.
And was Danny cooperative with that as well?
Yes, he and his mother gave consent for us to monitor his cell phone.
Were you involved in the monitoring of that wiretap moving forward in time?
I was.
Were you like the point person for it?
I was. I reviewed it every day.
Okay. I want to move forward to the October 12th interview. We've heard testimony from Special Agent Snyder about this. I just want to ask you about a couple of things. Was there a point, what was the main point of bringing her in? Were you bringing her in to notify her of anything in particular that day on October 12th?
That was the day that we provided the death notifications and notifications of landfill search to the family members.
And at what point in that day or that interview did you notify the defendant of that?
We never actually said that Quinton was dead with her. It was understood. So maybe halfway through the time, we made it clear, but we never said the word dead.
At some point during that interview, did you tell her something to the effect of, we're about to start searching that landfill and we're 98% sure we're going to find Quinton in it?
I was very confident we were going to find Quinton in the landfill when I spoke to her, yes.
Did you tell her that?
Yes.
How did she react to that?
She said he wasn't in the bag, but it was hard to characterize. It wasn't shock, which is the most surprising thing of it.
Did you inform her mother, the defendant's mother, Billy Joe Howell, of the same thing at some point that day?
About an hour later.
Yeah, was that after the defendant's interview had concluded?
It was.
Where were you when you informed the defendant's mother of that?
Brad and our victim specialist and I went to the Buckhalter Road residence and informed her in her living room.
And how did she react when you told her that?
I told her in order. I told her I was going to tell her 3 things, and when she was done processing one, we would move to the next. So the first thing I told her was that Quinton had died. And she showed anguish. When she was ready to hear the next thing, I told her that we were going to find him in the landfill and that we would be announcing that search was commencing. And she pulled back from me and she said, "My baby is in the trash." And
Your Honor, hearsay, she knows that.
I'm sorry.
Sustained,
May I respond, please, Your Honor?
please.
The witness is describing Billy Joe Howell asking a question. statement offered for the truth. It's a reaction.
She can offer a reaction, but the question, well, what she stated was what she said, what Billy Joe said.
When you, I understood, Your Honor.
Yes.
When you said that to Billy Joe Howell, that you believed him to be in the landfill, and that you were going to find him in the landfill, did she make any statements of fact to you in response to that?
No.
How did she react?
Shock, horror, disbelief, anguish. That there were 4 other people that we then notified that were at the house, and it was a picture of 5 different versions of anguish.
And was there a contrast there in how those people reacted and how the defendant had reacted earlier that day when you told her?
Yes.
Now, what was your, I want to ask you some questions about October 24th.
Okay.
Okay, but first I'd just like to ask you about, what was your typical day like between October 12th and October 24th? What did that look like for you?
Landfill operations commenced a few days following the 12th. So as those were going, I would get to the landfill for the sunrise brief to try to represent the case team and give some sort of morale or update motivation. I would go back to the office and review Danny's calls and texts from the previous day and attend to any investigative or administrative work that needed to be done. We were continuously following leads from the public and additional investigative avenues to make sure that we didn't close any doors too soon. And then Taylor and I would drive to the landfill to meet the team as they were wrapping up ahead of their lunch break so we could check boots, give updates, check on the status of everything, and kind of go in with everybody, and then back to the office.
Now, moving to October 24th, on this day, did the defendant make any recorded statements to anybody other than law enforcement?
Yeah, she was on the local news.
And did you watch that news interview?
I did.
Do you see in front of you an exhibit marked as State's Exhibit 71?
I do.
All right. Your Honor, this is a certified copy of the defendant's October 24th news interview with WTSC. It's supported by a testing certificate. I would move this in to State 71 at this time.
No objection.
Without objection.
Now, do you see in front of you a disc marked as State's Exhibit 72?
I do.
Now, do you know what that is? You need to pull it out of the envelope to see, or what?
It's labeled WTOC interview redacted.
Okay. How does that exhibit differ from the one we just introduced?
This one is titled, Exhibit 71 is titled WTOC interview.
Okay. But I mean, what is 72 in relation to 71?
72 is what was shown on the news.
Okay.
And the 71 is the unredacted footage from WTOC.
Okay. And so 72 is?
What was shown on the news from WTOC,
Okay.
of the news article.
72, is that like just the portions from the WTOC broadcast stitched together to show only the defendant talking?
Yes.
And like not the anchors and reporters and so forth?
Yes.
All right. At this point, Your Honor, I can introduce State's Exhibit 72.
Any objection?
No objection.
There's without objection.
Now, what are we going to hear the defendant say in this video? To the extent you remember.
That she didn't know where Quinton was and hoped he would be found, but if she had had anything to take responsibility for, that she would.
And with that, I'll publish it, Your Honor.
My kids woke up to me screaming, "Where's Quinton?" and running through the house. I ran and looked everywhere, inside, outside, just started screaming for help. I've been here every day since this. I am not running and I'm not hiding. And if something does come up that I am at fault, I will take myself to that police station. And I will walk with her. All we want is justice for Quinton Simon. That's it. We want justice for Quinton.
Whatever cost of this. We don't care the cost.
We want answers just like everybody else does. At the end of it all, we love you, baby Q. My little monkey, and we want to hold.
So that was an interview that was filmed and aired on October 24th, right?
Yes.
Right. Had you been in contact with her via telephone during the investigation?
With both Leilani and Billy, yes.
Can you tell us how you came to be in phone contact with the defendant?
On one of the days the team was at the residence, I walked out to give a backpack to her brother because it had medication in it, and during that conversation, the defendant offered me her phone number.
So from that point forward, you're able to call and text with her, I guess?
Yes.
Okay. This same day, October 24th, that she does this interview where she says, we don't know what happened, we just want answers and justice, and if he's alive, we want home. Did she send you a text message saying something different from that?
She did.
Do you see in front of you a document marked as State's Exhibit 73?
I do.
Can you tell us, is that a portion of your text message traffic with the defendant?
It is.
All right. Does it fairly and accurately depict at least this portion of the messages that the two of you exchanged?
It does.
Your Honor, I would introduce this as State 73. Let me look at it.
No objection, guys.
Exhibit 73 is admitted without objection.
All right. On the first page, you with me?
I am.
Okay. Do you see that last entry at the bottom there?
I do.
Is this an incoming text that you received from the defendant or an outgoing text that you sent?
It is an incoming text that I received.
And what is the date and time of this text?
October 24th, 2022 at 5:45 p.m.
So that would have been right about the time that this interview was airing on the evening news, I guess?
Probably, yes.
Okay. What did she message you at that time?
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
I'm not lying for Danny anymore. The reason why my story about Oragel and shit didn't make sense was because Danny told me to say that. He was the one who left, and my phone was in the car from my previous trip, and his was on the charger. I was already smoking a blunt on the porch, and when I got done, Danny was already laying in bed. All the lights were off, and I glanced at the kids as I was getting in the bed to go to sleep. That is why he took off. I'm innocent of this. He was the last one to see Quinton. He is that texted the babysitter, and he was that wasn't in bed when I woke for just a moment, and it was still dark, and he was the one who the only set of keys to my car the morning of my son's disappearance.
Now, did you later bring her in for an interview to memorialize that statement?
I did.
Formal interview. And when was that conducted?
October 31st.
Where was it conducted?
At the FBI office.
What was your approach in this interview?
We really just wanted to it was a new story, and so we wanted to make sure that we had correctly captured what she was presenting to us. So we asked her to talk about what she had provided in the text and to just give the context and the complete story of that.
And did she essentially repeat to you what she had said in the text message?
More or less over the course of longer.
Okay. During this interview, we've seen some interviews to this point where she's sort of being challenged on things and has a certain reaction to that. During this interview, were you challenging her or pushing back, or were you more just letting her talk?
No, the goal was to just let her talk and get her whole story.
And what was her demeanor like in this interview?
She was affable. We were laughing, the three of us, Detective Lemons and I, and Leilani. She was open, calm.
Now, did you, on this same day that interview was conducted, Did you all collect DNA samples from the defendant and her mother?
We did.
Can you tell me about the process for doing that? Who did it and what was done?
Usually we let them do it themselves when they're consenting. Basically, you have a giant Q-tip and you scrape the inside of the cheek to get some cheek cells, and you place it in a plastic baggie and seal it up in front of everybody.
All right, and is it marked with the name of the person who it came from?
It is.
Did you log those into evidence at the Savannah FBI office?
I did.
One item for the defendant's DNA sample and one for the mother's?
That's correct.
All right. Were you involved in having those sent to the FBI lab in Quantico at some point?
Yes, I directed them to be FedExed to the lab.
And did that happen?
It did.
Okay. When did that happen in relation to November 18, the day that the remains were discovered?
We sent the DNA up on or around November 1st, just so it would be ready for the lab.
Okay. Now, we've talked a little bit about the phone monitoring operation. And I think you said you were the one who was doing that on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
Do you see in front of you a disc marked as State's Exhibit 74?
I do.
Okay. Do you know what that disc is?
These are select recordings from Danny's wire.
Did they fairly and accurately capture a couple of conversations that they had during this investigation?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would introduce this as State 72.
Objection.
Department 74.
74.
And I would ask to publish just a couple portions of this. There are two files on this disk. The first one is a call with the date 10/30/2022 in the subject line. When would that call have been made?
This would have been the night before that Halloween interview would have been made on October 30th.
Okay. And I'm going to open that file up and play starting at 9:50.
I've been getting up every day, 7 or 8 in the morning. It's what happens, I guess, with sober in the morning. I wake up early. I go to bed at a decent time. I get up in the morning and make breakfast for everybody. And I clean the house. And I'm a completely different person. I didn't notice when I take care of the house. And clean. I do dishes.
Yeah, it's been a while since you've done that.
Yeah. No, I do. I actually cook dinner and I do the things you deserve for me to do. I'm sorry. I will never touch cook or cooking again. I become angry and impulsive when I'm on it.
I've stopped the playback at 11:05. What was it we heard her say there about the effect of cocaine on her?
That it makes her angry and impulsive.
The next file on this disk has the date 10/31/2022 in the file name. When would that call have been made?
The evening of October 31st, 2022.
Is that the same day of the interview in which she was putting it on Danny?
It is.
2702. We'll go with 2703.
So what did you do when you went out after I fell asleep?
All I did was wait for long. I haven't got my word on.
All right, what was that exchange there that we heard?
Danny asked Leilani again what she had done after he had gone to sleep the night that Quinton disappeared, and she said that she had done a line and went out to get the Orajel.
Now, did that conflict in any way with what she had just told you in the October 31st interview?
It did.
In what manner?
She said that she didn't go get Orajel and during the interview, and that Danny had been the one driving the car.
Now, at some point, well, you were at the residence on October 5th at some point, right?
I was.
And was the pack and play that Quinton was said to have been sleeping in, and the pillow and pillowcase in the pack and play, was that taken into evidence?
That day it was, yes.
What agency initially took it into evidence?
The Chatham County Police Department.
And was the pillow and pillowcase at some point turned over to you from the Chatham County Police Department?
It was.
Who gave it to you?
Detective Lemons.
Okay, and what did you do with it?
I prepared it to be FedEx to the lab for analysis.
In Quantico?
The FBI lab, yes, in Quantico.
And did that happen? Was it FedEx to the lab?
It was.
Okay. Now I'd like to ask you about November 18th.
Okay.
Were you involved in the coordination and supervision of the landfill search throughout?
Yes, I staffed all of the volunteers from Savannah and Brunswick, and as I mentioned earlier, I was present at least twice a day. If I didn't have administrative or investigative work on a given day, I was dressed out searching.
Now, we've heard some testimony to this point that suspected human remains were found there that day after some period of unsuccessful searching. Were you there at the outset of that discovery that day?
I was at the United States Attorney's Office facilitating an interview, and Brad called me and said that a skull had been found, and I immediately left the meeting at the U.S. Attorney's Office and quickly got to the landfill and was there for the rest of the day and the additional findings.
Can you describe what was going on when you got there? What was the scene like at the landfill?
Somber, but everyone was looking very, very carefully. We knew we were looking for small pieces of a small child, and fortunately the skull is more recognizable, and so we had believed that if we found one piece, all other pieces that we would find would be within 6 feet of the trash as it was compacted. So we knew that that was our day when we found him at the beginning of the day. And so we were, as you can imagine, there are a lot of bones in a landfill. And so we had to sort through chicken wings and T-bones and all of that to find what appeared to be human and separate those out. And that was throughout the day.
What do you remember about the period of time that passed from the first apparent item, I guess from the first apparent item of human remains being found and you getting that call from Brad to when you all kind of stopped identifying suspected human remains that day? How long did that process of discovery take?
It took, I would estimate, around 5 to 6 hours. We finished the search from where the skull had been found, laid out more trash and searched that and broke for lunch. That search section had been pushed over during lunch, but then we realized that there were more likely bones within it that appeared to be human. And so our I asked them to pull the deck back, meaning the trash they pushed aside that we'd been through, they were able to pull it back with the bulldozer, and we researched that. And so after that, we did one more deck, maybe two, without finding anything, and that was the end of the day.
What do you mean by one more deck, maybe two? What is it?
So the landfill had laid out a large open space that was flat. And we knew the pretty specific area where we expected to find Quinton, but trash as far as Statesboro was coming to our landfill, and so you imagine it compacted very quickly. So we had to dig through the compacted trash, pull out a reasonable amount to search at a time in a safe place. We had safety officers out because there's a lot that can cut you, and we didn't have an issue with noxious fumes, but that was also a concern. So we'd pull that out. The safety officers would look through the deck and make sure that the search team was cleared to go forward. And then we had these rakes, and you would rake through every little piece and open trash bags that were still open and work your way until you had discarded all of the trash behind you, and the group kind of converged in a circle and turned in the bones that we had collected or the items of interest that we weren't quite sure, just needed someone else to look at. Most of us carried a bag on our taped to ourselves so we could just drop the bones in and keep going when there was something like a skull, or on this day a swath of skin or pieces that needed immediate attention. We would call someone forward. Since I was not a searcher that day, I would go onto the deck to get pieces to bring back to the evidence tent.
How far apart on the search deck were pieces of Quinton found from one another?
That's kind of hard to describe, because they were he was strewn, because he'd been strewn when he was compacted into his place of rest at the time, and then the bulldozer dug up chunks and laid out the deck, and then we spread them out. And so he was found across 2 or 3 decks, and the decks were, half a football field. So many searchers found different pieces of him, yes.
So if you do the math, 3 different decks, each of which is maybe a half of a football field, talking about like 1.5 football field area over which pieces of Quinton were found.
Once he was spread out, or once the decks were spread out, yes.
Do you see in front of you a binder marked as State's Exhibit? You see in front of you a binder?
I do.
Is it marked as a State's Exhibit?
It is. It's marked as
the number?
77.
Okay. Could you take a look through that and tell me if you recognize it? What's in there?
I do.
What are you looking at there?
I'm looking at evidence photos of human remains.
And are those the pieces of Quinton that you were talking about being found that day?
They are.
Okay. Where were these photographed before they were transported to the lab at Quantico?
They were.
Okay. And do these photographs fairly and accurately depict the suspected remains of Quinton Simon as you viewed them that day?
They do.
Your Honor, I would introduce this as State's Exhibit 77.
Subject to the publishing and, I guess, rules we talked about earlier, Judge, no objection.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Yeah, 77 is admitted.
I'd like to publish just a few. First of all, there's like 60-some pictures in there, right? I'd like to publish just a few of them and ask you a couple questions about them, okay?
Okay.
Can you flip to the first page in that binder?
Yes.
Is this it up on the screen here?
It is.
What does that appear to you to be, and what did it appear to you to be that day?
It is the top half of a skull.
Sorry.
That's it.
Can you flip to the second image in this binder?
Yes.
What does this appear to you to be, and what did it appear to you to be that day?
When we found this and brought it to the tents, we weren't sure when we saw it from here. What I know now and can see is it is a severed foot, cut from the ankle, looking from the inside of the ankle down.
Can you see the ankle bones in this image, just to orient us?
Yes, to orient, this is the ankle bone where it was cut, and then you see almost a left toenail, and you can start seeing the shape of the foot from there.
Turning to the next page in the binder.
Yes.
What is this?
That is the same foot flipped over so you can clearly see the skin of the foot. This is his heel. And then you shape down to the tips of the toe bones through the five. We had a huge poster of Quinton after bath time, dressed and barefooted on the top of the landfill to remember what we were looking for. And so we had been looking at his foot and his forehead for 5 weeks, and that is what we found. That is his foot.
And finally, the fourth image in the binder.
Yes.
What do you believe this to be?
I believe that it is a swath of skin going from the length of a body, of a toddler's body. So the shoulders come through the back and then down one leg. This was a piece that Officer Zerke passed to Kim Johnson, who passed to me as we carried out with tongs, because at the time it was hard to recognize, but we knew it stood out from everything else we had seen in the landfill.
Now, I'd like to ask you some questions about getting Quinton up to the FBI lab in Quantico. Okay? We've heard testimony from Special Agent Taylor Burns that he was responsible for initially transporting Quinton's remains from the landfill that day to the FBI office in Savannah. Does that align with your recollection?
Yes, we all met him at the office afterwards.
And he's described the packaging of Quinton into 4 different bags and placing them inside of a box.
Yes.
Were you involved in a further transport of Quinton to the FBI lab?
I was.
Can you tell us about that?
Starting from the beginning of the day, or just the logistics?
What happened who took them from the FBI lab in Savannah to anywhere else?
So we arranged for private transport for Quinton. no one felt comfortable FedExing him or putting him on any other way. So I wrapped the box and drove him to Macon, where I met another agent who is on our fly team. And I handed Quinton to Agent Keys, who took him to Atlanta and kept him secure until the next day, where he flew him on an FBI aircraft to meet the lab in Virginia.
Is that how Quinton got to the FBI lab at Quantico?
It is.
Do you see in front of you two pictures stapled together and marked with States Exhibit? I think it should be 93, is that right?
92?
92, okay. Do you recognize those images?
I do.
What are those images show?
That is how I wrapped Quinton's box to transport him. And so the first image was what I could offer to the family when I gave a second death notification. And the second image is how he rode with me in our truck.
Do these images fairly and accurately depict the events that you've been talking about?
Yes, I took the second picture myself.
I'd offer this in a States Exhibit 92, Ron.
Submit it without objection.
Publish the first image here. Can you describe to us what we're seeing here?
We had wrapped, Scott Schumann and Jeff Allen were at the office with me for me to retrieve Quinton and to borrow Scott's work truck to drive him. We, three of us, had just a quiet time wrapping him appropriately, and we thought this would be a nice image to be able to give. It's what I gave to Leilani and Billy Joe when I told them we had found him in the landfill. But he is in that box. He's in the bags in the box. And we wrapped it in a black cloth and then the flag.
Moving on to the second image.
That is Quinton in my back seat, how he rode with me on the way to Macon.
One moment, please, Ron. What was the date that Quinton made it to the lab in Quantico? Do you remember?
On or around November 21st.
We talked a little bit earlier about the defendant telling you via text message on October 24, and then in an interview on October 31, that she actually hadn't driven to Azalea and had been dancing with her phone or something like that. Do you remember talking about that?
I do.
Did she eventually admit to you that that wasn't true?
Yes. About Danny?
Yeah.
Yes.
And was that on November 21st in her final interview?
Yes.
Okay. And did she tell you at that time that what she had said about Danny on October 24th and October 31 was just a theory that she was throwing out there?
That's correct.
One moment, please. When evidence is submitted to the FBI lab, is it submitted under a particular FBI case number?
It is.
Was that done in this case with all the items that you've discussed?
Yes.
What was that FBI case number?
7C-AT-. 3665337.
Say that last part again.
3665337. The Quinton Simon case.
Now just ask me how you, I expected you to have to refer to your notes. How is it that you remember that off the top of your head?
We saw it a lot.
No further questions, Ryan.
Judge, can we approach for a second?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 15-minute break, come back. We're going to recess for that period of time. Same instructions, don't discuss the case, don't look up anything about the case, no research. All right, 15 minutes.
Jury's exiting.
Okay, by my watch, thank you very much. That'll be about 5:35, a little bit more than 15 minutes.
One of the jurors had her eyes closed. That was the main reason why I asked.
Okay, yeah, it's been a long day, and I was keeping an eye on the jurors as well. So let's take our 15, we'll come back and resume. Thank you. J6 in the state of Georgia versus Leilani Simon. Ms. Simon is present with her counsel at counsel's table. The state is present as well. Jurors are not in the room yet. So tomorrow morning start time. We'll start at 9:30. Okay. I realized that I got scheduled with body hearings, a couple of them at 9 o'clock. But we can start by 9:30. I should be here. Anything else that we need to take up before we start again?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you.
There you go.
Mr. Hilliard, are you ready to proceed?
I am.
And the state's ready?
Yes.
Okay. Please bring in the jurors.
Jurors in summer? Roll clear, Judge.
All right. Thank you, Williams. Okay. Please have your seats. And you've observed the rules, the court's instructions? Thank you. Mr. Hilliard?
Special Agent Solomon, you said you went to Georgia Tech and you got your bachelor's in what again?
Economics, International Affairs, and French.
Okay, and so economics, international affairs, and French, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And you got your master's in what?
Business administration with concentrations in finance and entrepreneurship.
No psychology training or anything like that?
No, not in school.
All right, well, that begs the question then, if not in school, then where?
On the job.
On the job? Okay. And you say on the job, I'm going to assume you mean at the academy, right?
And throughout the job, on the job training or various trainings throughout. I've been with the Bureau for 14 years, so the behavioral analysis unit will give short trainings, lunch and learns, things like that, as well as consults on various cases that I worked on.
But you're not in the behavioral analysis unit, are you?
I am not.
Okay, I didn't think so. That kind of threw me for a loop. So let me ask a question with kind of the first thing you talked about. You're talking about Exhibit 10, Image 109. I'm familiar with the conversation that you're talking about as a Mickey Mouse toy. You said that had been there for a minute, correct?
I said it appeared that it had been there a minute.
So, I mean, it did have dust and cobwebs and stuff like that on it, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you also then immediately after that referenced a conversation you had with Ms. Simon. But I remember that conversation. I don't remember her saying that it was a racing Mickey Mouse toy, and I don't remember her saying it was his favorite toy either. So what was the relevance of the Mickey Mouse picture you showed us?
I had not spoken to Ms. Simon yet when I found the Mickey Mouse toy. I knew it from other investigators that she had stated that he had been missing with his favorite Mickey Mouse toy. So the first Mickey Mouse toy and the only Mickey Mouse toy that I saw, I noted.
Right, but that wasn't what she said. That was what you embellished, correct?
Objection, argumentative. And badgering as well.
Okay. He does have her on cross-examination. Mr. Hilliard.
I'll rephrase it and break it down if it'll make it better. So your testimony was that was his favorite toy, and it was a racing Mickey Mouse toy. But that wasn't what she stated. That was what you stated, correct?
I didn't state that that toy in the image was his favorite toy. I stated that she said he was missing with his favorite toy, which was a Mickey Mouse toy.
Well, then that begs the question then, because what was the relevance of that picture then? If that wasn't his favorite Mickey Mouse toy, and it wasn't a racing Mickey Mouse, and that toy had been there in the garage for a minute, what was the relevance of that picture? None. I'll move on. Thank you.
Objection. The witness should be permitted to answer.
Thank you. Sustain.
On October 5th, we had known this family and the circumstances for only a matter of hours. So every single detail that was presented to us, we pursued and we followed and we looked to give context to. So if we were told that a favorite toy was a Mickey Mouse toy, we looked for a Mickey Mouse toy to see if there was any truth to the statement. And I was able to provide that image to various people in Quinton's family to see if they recognized that toy or any other Mickey Mouse toy as one that Quinton preferred.
Okay. Did you do that?
Yes.
Okay. Did anyone say that was his favorite toy?
They said no Mickey Mouse toy was his favorite toy.
Correct. Okay. So, as a matter of fact, you stated that that had been there, looked like it had been there for quite a while, right?
Yes.
Okay. So not the first time we've heard about this Mickey Mouse toy. Okay. So my point is on October 5th, when this whole thing started, okay, you didn't know the relevance or importance of the Mickey Mouse toy, correct?
I did when I had that photo taken.
Okay.
The relevance was that he was reported missing with his favorite toy. There were hundreds of toys in that house, and that is the only Mickey Mouse toy that stood out.
I would say there were probably 1,000 toys in that house.
That's fair.
And I think that's a fair assessment. There were a lot
I
of
agree.
toys, okay. But my point is that was 2 years ago. Here we are 2 years later, okay? And you've had a chance to review all that. So my point is while on October 5th of 2022 that may have seemed relevant to you or important to you, and I can understand that, here we are 2 years later, and you know that it's of no importance, and yet you still harp on that. Why is that?
Objection, argumentative, also just not a question for all the words.
Sustain.
I will move forward then. You also talked about the appropriate level of emotionality. Okay. What is the appropriate level of emotionality? Who trained you as to what the appropriate level is?
I didn't state appropriate. I cannot judge appropriate. I can only state what I observe.
But that's not true. You have judged appropriate, and you stated it several times on direct from Mr. Dean, did you not?
Did I say appropriate?
Well, the appropriate level of emotionality. You said that I'm trying to look at her, the exact words was overly emotional, I guess, or not showing enough emotion. That seems to be the two things we're getting with her. So with regard to Ms. Simon, she either shows too much emotion or she shows not the appropriate level of emotion. What's the appropriate level of emotion?
When I use those comparisons, it's within the bell curve of my observations across other people in similar circumstances, other people at different baselines that I've observed, and she was generally at one extreme or the other of my experience in dealing with people.
Okay. And let's talk about your first time meeting Ms. Simon was October 5th, correct?
Yes.
You had never met her before that day, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You didn't know her before that day, correct?
Correct.
And you drew your conclusions based on that day, correct?
No.
Really? So you didn't decide that she wasn't being truthful or she wasn't showing the appropriate emotion on October 5th of 2022?
I didn't speak to her about anything substantive on October 5th.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. I'll move on. How about October 7th, or was it? Or 8th? Which was it?
I didn't speak to her on either of those days.
October 12th.
I did.
Okay. You made one by then, correct? And that was 1 week later.
Yes.
Okay. Had you spoken to her between October 5th and October 12th?
Yes.
On the phone, in person?
Both, or definitely in person and text. Sometimes when I would talk to her mom on the phone, she would be there, but not directly on the phone.
So again, it comes back to having had a week's worth of it. What would be the appropriate level of emotion to satisfy you at that point in time on October 12th?
There's no answer to that.
Exactly. So you spoke to Mr. Youngkin, correct?
Yes.
And same question for him. You never met him on October 5th, had you?
Correct.
And you didn't know anything about him on October 5th, did you?
Correct.
Okay. But you came to the conclusion that he showed the appropriate emotional level, correct?
I didn't say appropriate.
Okay. Well, then what did you say then?
I said he was exhausted and forthcoming, but minimized certain items. I believe that was my testimony.
And I believe you did speak with him on October 5th, correct?
5th, yes.
And he was angry and tired and upset as the interview wore on, was he not?
He was frustrated at the 11 p.m.
Well, in your mind, is frustrated the same thing as angry?
No.
What's the difference?
Frustrated can be exasperation towards a specific situation, but not directed towards a person.
Okay. So, then what's your definition of angry then?
Negative emotion towards a person.
So, angry means towards a person, and frustrated means towards a situation.
They're not the same emotion.
Okay. So, can you be angry without being frustrated?
Yes.
Can you be frustrated without being angry?
Yes.
Can you be frustrated or angry without being violent?
Yes.
So it is possible then.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you also talked to Mr. Dean about a tattoo. Is it uncommon for parents to get tattoos of their children?
No.
Okay. So there's nothing unusual about that. Parents do it all the time, correct?
Correct.
And this was a statement that was made, was it on October 12th?
On the 5th and the 12th.
The 5th and the 12th. And was it made on video, audio? Where was it made?
The 12th was made on video and audio.
So on the 12th, she talked about the tattoo on video?
Yes.
Okay. Not outside smoking?
That was on the 5th.
Okay. And do you ever recall Danny ever saying, I'm going to assume since you were in charge of the hotel audio and video, you've watched most, if not all of that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you ever recall Danny saying, I'm just trying to save my own ass in one of their arguments?
I don't remember that verbatim, but yes,
He said something.
that would he would have said something to that effect. Yes.
Right. Okay. And was it really his idea, or was it just part of the natural suggestion in the conversation you had with him? I mean, you were already going that way anyway in the conversation, weren't you?
The hotel had already been addressed as far as just giving them a place away from the hubbub of the house. But he did jump ahead of what we were talking about to ask if we were going to wire it up.
Well, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it's not like you weren't already suggesting in that direction to begin with, were you? He kind of already knew what was coming.
I don't know what he knew at the time he addressed that.
Okay. Well, who offered did he ask to be put up in a hotel?
I believe our victim services offered that.
So you offered to Leilani to put him up in a hotel, or you offered to Danny to put him up in a hotel?
I don't know. I wasn't part of that conversation.
Okay. But it was offered?
It was offered.
And they accepted, or Danny accepted?
I don't know who accepted.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. You had mentioned something to Mr. Dean on direct examination a minute ago. You had said that you pretty much had told Leilani on October 8th that you suspected that Quinton was dead. Is that a fair statement?
I had not. I didn't speak to Leilani on October 8th.
Well, I didn't say you did. I said you had intimated as early as October 8th that y'all suspected that Quinton was dead.
I said as early as October 5th we suspected he was dead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote it down wrong. October 5th then. Okay? So, and that's, again, part of the interrogation techniques would be confronting people with your beliefs or your opinion or your ideas of the evidence, correct?
Yes.
and inconsistencies, which you've done, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so y'all pretty much stated that from October 5th forward that that's what you believed, and I'm seeing the videos ad nauseum, and that was what you and Agent Schneider and Detective Lemons and basically anyone who did any interviews with Miss Simon suggested to her, correct? That they believed that she had done something to her child or to come clean about it, correct?
For the most part.
Right. So I'm a little curious because when Mr. Dean asked you a minute ago about her reaction sometime later when you said that you believed Quinton to be dead in the landfill, you made a big deal about her lack of emotion, but she'd been facing questioning from y'all for quite a while, correct?
Objection, argumentative, in particular the negative view portion of the question.
Mr. Hilliard,
I'll break
rephrase.
it down and do it one question at a time. So you questioned her many times. You've made, correct, from October 5th on.
The team.
The team,
Yeah.
not just you, the whole team, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a bunch of questionings, a bunch of interviews, a bunch of statements made by you and the entire team that you all believe Quinton's dead somewhere, right?
I don't think we said dad until the 12th.
Okay. And she's the focus of it completely for
Yes.
this entire week, right?
She was the only one that had lied to us, and that is why.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But from October 5th to October 12th, that's what you're doing, right?
Yes.
And then a minute ago, when Mr. Dean asked you, you said that, oh, she didn't react surprised when we said it, that we believe Quinton was dead. Well, you've been questioning her for a week, right? Do you think the emotion may have worn off by then?
It hadn't worn off on the other 5 people I told that day.
Okay. And everyone's the same, though, right?
If you're asking for a basis of comparison for why her reaction stood out in my mind versus the others, that is why.
Okay. And let's talk about that then. How often did you question, or your team questioned, Paul Simon? How many times in that same period of time?
He had been interviewed at least 3 times and had interacted with us on numerous occasions.
All right. So at least 3 interviews. How about Danny?
He had been interviewed at least 4 times, to my knowledge, and was in regular communication.
Okay. And he also helped you set up the wiretap and the hotel in the same time frame.
After his 3rd interview, yes.
Right. And how many times did you talk into Miss Simon, your team, in that same time frame?
Numerous times on the 5th. I'm not sure how many times that was. Once on the 8th, in person, non-substantive on the 10th, and then the 12th.
So again, a number of times, especially on the 5th, correct?
Yes.
So you don't think that any emotional shock may have worn off after all of that?
I have never seen a parent not be shocked when their child was dead.
Okay. Well, and let me ask you this. You'd already made your mind up on October 5th. The team had, at least, correct?
We had our suspicions. We had not made up our mind. We were pursuing all avenues.
Now, you talked about Mr. Dean played this, I guess it's the phone conversation where she says cocaine makes her angry and impulsive.
Yes.
Okay? But angry and impulsive does not mean violent, does it?
We didn't suggest that.
Well, now, with regard to your involvement of taking the remains to the lab, you took it from here to Macon, then to Atlanta, and then by plane to Virginia, correct?
Was the path, yes.
Right.
My leg was to Macon.
Right. And you spoke with, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, but When was it you spoke with Danny Youngkin yourself?
About what?
Anything?
I spoke with him on October 5th and October 7th and October 8th and 9th. After that, he was no longer in Savannah, and I didn't see him in person for the rest of the investigation, and he mostly spoke with Brad over the phone. So I don't know the individual times I spoke with him over the phone, with Brad.
All right. We'll just speak about what you know. When did Mr. Youngkin leave to go back to North Carolina?
On around October 9th.
So from October 5th to 9th, he was here, went back to Dunn, North Carolina, October 9th.
By way of Atlanta, I believe.
Okay. And you said you seized the pack and play and I guess the pillow or sheets or whatever it was that was in the pack and play?
I seized it from Chatham County, who had seized it from the house.
All right. And you forwarded it to
The
crime
FBI lab.
Okay. And did you also listen to the wiretap?
I did.
Okay. Did you listen to all of the wiretap?
I did.
Okay. At any point in time on the wiretap, did Miss Simon say that she had intentionally harmed her child?
No.
Did she ever say she stabbed, shot, strangled, did any of those things to that child?
No.
Okay. And how long was the wiretap in place, if you remember?
Until sometime after November 21st, within a couple of days, we would have taken it down.
So about 6 weeks, give or take.
Correct.
And same thing, you watched or listened to all of the hotel audio and video. Same question. Did she ever say that she harmed her child?
There was question of the definition of the word harm.
Well, I'll break it down then for you.
I meant for her, was why, as far as spanking, that kind of thing, versus the other items that you just listed.
Well, let's talk about strangling. Did she say she strangled her kid?
No.
Shot her kid? Stabbed her kid?
No.
Okay. And you've watched them all, and I'm not going to go through them all, but they were a lot of heated exchanges between her and Danny in that hotel room, were there not?
There were.
Okay. That's all the questions I got, Judge.
Any redirect?
No, please, Your Honor. I'd like to play for you a short video clip here and see whether you can tell us what this is, okay? All right. First of all, looking at the first frame of this video, do you recognize the date, place, and event?
Yes, this is October 12th at the FBI office, interview of Miss Simon.
All right. This is a 36-second video clip from that interview, Your Honor. I have not marked this disc yet, but I will mark it as the next exhibit in sequence, and I will now offer this clip into evidence as a state's exhibit. What is it going to be? 93? 93.
Any objection?
I have to see it first.
Do you need an opportunity to see it?
36 seconds. I listened to it, Judge, no objection.
All right, thank you. Exhibit 93 is admitted without objection.
I'll play that now. Can the court hear that as it's playing from the laptop speaker?
It needs to be a little louder though.
We pegged the laptop speakers here, so the ones out here. I'm not trying to prolong this. There we go.
I've been thinking a lot about your tattoo though, because what happens when you go down?
Yeah, so this is what I'm going to do because all of this, whatever, I'm take over this, there's like a mirror and a compass and some stars and trees and stuff, and I'm going to place in here. I'm supposed to remember all those numbers right here. And just waiting for it, because I think those people are wondering what was playing. And that's just what I'm,
Can you tell us more or less what she was saying there? It's a little difficult to make out.
She was describing the tattoo I brought up was the Hawaiian symbol I was talking about earlier, and then she was describing her intentions for a more elaborate tattoo for the future for Quinton.
And what was she saying she wanted to be in it? I heard something about compasses maybe.
And water, because he likes to swim.
And you're saying that's something that she had talked to you about as early as October 5th?
Yes.
And I think you noted that earlier as something that you found a little unusual, right?
Yes.
Did it sound to you like she was describing like an in memoriam tattoo?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
To rephrase your question?
Are you familiar with in memoriam tattoos?
I am.
People will get with like a date of death and date of birth and so forth.
Yes.
Did it sound to you like that's the sort of tattoo that she was describing?
Yes.
Calls for speculation, Judge.
Given the question, not allowed.
So I'll just ask the question again for clarity of the record. Did it sound to you like that is the sort of tattoo that she was describing?
Yes, because the other two children weren't mentioned in that conversation.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any recalls? Okay. And is there any reason not to excuse this witness?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You are excused, ma'am. Thank you.